Good afternoon. We are here on How-To Diorama. Thanks very much for coming in. I think it's going to be kind of fun. We're going to look at this. This is what we started last week, and it actually came out pretty neat. I like it. I was kind of worried. The middle part of this thing is actually a Humvee hood. And so I'm trying to make it into a kind of scientific, piece of equipment that they have that the Japanese scientists and Japanese soldiers are working on Godzilla's hand. And here is Godzilla's hand. So I'm gonna see if I can get some better shadows on it. I got the second application of the air dry clay on there, and it's still quite cold, meaning that it's still quite wet, but it's coming along. So I'm pretty excited with how it came out, and I like the shape. It still needs a skin. It still needs a final skin that I'll have to sculpt onto it. But this, I hope, is the last stage of like the substrate, the muscle layer, all that kind of stuff. I didn't try to do that. I just wanted to get the general shape so that when I do go to the skin, I can put that on there thin, use milliput, which I think is going to give me a better final texture than this. Maybe not, but that's what I'm going to do. And then I think it'll be great. Then I can start painting it. So I want to say hello to some fine folks that have been here and waiting, and I want to say hello to everybody. So Stephen is here. Hello, Bill, and everyone. Keep on modeling. Thank you, Stephen. Paul is here. Hello, or evening, fellow modelers. And then First Last is here. Hello, First Last. It's been great having Fridays off so I can regularly watch this again. Thank you so much. That is really, really nice of you to say. I really appreciate it. And James is here. Hello, James. I really, really appreciate you coming in. Last weekend, I feel so bad for coming in late, but we had this wonderful panel on a diorama that James Skiffins, the model officer, is starting right now. And I, put links into the last video for this, but I'll add some more because it's a really outstanding project, and it's something that really reminds me of the kind of multi-layered projects that I like to do. This one has only got, I guess, 3 levels, which for me is kind of low in count because my last level or my last diorama had 6. But building in that way and building in it the ability to have different scenes still interconnected, but they are separate scenes all into themselves to make up the complete story of your diorama. It's something that I've enjoyed doing for a long, long time, and James was nice enough to bring me into it, and ask me some questions and allow me to comment on his build. So thank you so much. I was very humbled, but it was also wonderful to be there to speak with you and to Rob and to Martin Drayton. It was really a joy because when you get folks like that together who do this with a great amount of passion, man, I just sit there and soak it all in and learn. And just seeing people talk about things, seeing how people will take and handle a certain situation that I find myself in as a diorama builder as well was wonderful. To hear those other gentlemen that I was again on with um, express their ideas and stuff like that. Man, James, it's just brilliant stuff. I really would love to do that again. I'm hoping we can, because for me, it's like going to a university talk or a TED talk, and I just absolutely loved it. So thank you so much for inviting me to that. So back to this. I have continued my little scratch building journey. And before we get to that, though, what I would like to do is say hello to There's our Hand of Godzilla. Shane Hunt. Shane has sent in more pictures, and if you remember, we had some pictures of Shane's metal forging work. You know, he's gotten into blacksmithing, and I think that I do some form of blacksmithing when I'm working on dioramas, believe it or not. When I'm hammering out copper, when I'm working with steel, when I'm building like the hand crank for my Tarawa, the very large Tarawa display, where it has a hand crank in there, I'm using some brass to make a handle. And it was just because I had this background in different techniques, different, I mean, completely different kind of crafts and that I believe can bring in a much more rounded or a deeper understanding or just more things to pull out of your tricks, your bag of tricks when you're trying to create something. I think that if you concentrate on just modeling, that's wonderful. I think if you concentrate on just modeling and then go into dioramas or displays or trying to build full stories around your models, bringing in other aspects of your life, different disciplines is the word I was trying to think of before and I was stumbling. But those different disciplines, I think, make it a much more richer experience because it adds something that maybe other people don't. There's something also about scratch building, which is certainly the topic for today, both in making these, but also in making the hand. You know, I mean, all of this could have been 3D printed. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm fine with 3D printing. I don't necessarily like it because of the smell and the mess and the blah, 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 and trying to find files or buying files. And some of those files can be very expensive. I saw a really nice, I was just looking, a figure, and I want to say it was a 1/6 scale figure, and it was a newer figure, and they wanted 200 some odd dollars, for the STL file, and it was 100% worth it. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying I can pay somebody that I can get an outstanding model that I can go ahead and paint and stuff like that, or I can go into that and try to do it myself. I'm of the I guess temperament that I like to go in there and try and do it myself, and I like to learn those techniques, and I like to challenge myself. And so that's a lot of what I do here in the shop. Is it's a series of challenges. It's a series of putting something ahead of me that I'm not 100% sure that I'm going to be able to achieve. I know that from past experience, I have the base disciplines, the techniques and the ideas and the things like that can take that diorama along. But it's been years. I'm 60. It takes years to get to that point. So if you're a little bit younger, if you're just getting into it, or if you're wondering what base skills can help me in diorama building, I honestly believe, and this is not just hyperbole, anything, virtually anything, broaden your scope, look around. Don't just limit yourself to just model building. I know it, and I'm sure it was maybe an overstatement, but in speaking to some modelers a number of years ago, and they've changed their minds and they have gone into other stuff. But when I started talking to them about the different elements that go into model building, like dioramas or displays or something like that, electricity, lighting, all that kind of stuff. Photography was the actual thing that we were talking about. I said, hey, photography, can really help because photography teaches you composition and it teaches you lighting and it teaches you a lot of things that I believe it can help. And the comment back was, well, look, this is my hobby and I don't want to go into that. Now, that wasn't just saying that person wasn't interested in those things, because they did get into those things a little bit later on, but that person was kind of had that that idea that if I want to get really good at something, I have to put all my focus on that one thing. And I think there's a lot of validity to that, but I have just chosen an alternate path. I really want to get better every single project that I build, building scale models, painting figures, all of those things. I really want to get better at that. But the path that I promote and I take myself is to broaden the gaining of knowledge, the gaining of techniques, the gaining of different disciplines that can allow you to make a much more interesting diorama. So before everybody runs away from this thing, I'm going to stop talking and we're going to start looking at stuff. But I just wanted to talk about that and, give you some idea as to more of the aim and the goal of what I try to do, which is mainly scratch building in creating my dioramas. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these projects. So we talked about Shane Hunt's Forge. I don't think we looked at it. I'm very sorry about that. But Shane had sent in some pictures of some wonderful stuff that he's doing. Again, this is not model building, but I believe that there are things in this that you can learn from. Now, I have always thought about building my own forge. I really want to build one where I've got, a steel tube and then you line it with either cement is what I heard, but I've seen other people do kind of what you're going to see here as we look at other pictures. Um, if you look inside that forge, it's got this batting. It's kind of like that heat resistant material. I think it's fiberglass um, that allows it to hold heat and insulate and stuff like that. So he's got this nice little forge. Now I thought of building my own, but man, this thing is amazing. This little forge he's got, he said it was like $100, and you just hook it up to your propane tank and it's all ready to go. The front and back open so you can have complete full throughput on the forge. So, when you have your forge, sometimes you want to do the middle of a bar. You got a bar this long that you're working on, and I got to work on the middle. Well, you open the back of the forge, open the front of the forge, you put it in there, and you're heating up the middle. So it's a really nice little flexible forge for $100. I was just like, wow, you can't beat it. And it looks to be stainless steel. I don't know that for 100%. But it looks like stainless. So I think that's a great option for people that are maybe wanting to get into something. And you see, Shane has not gotten, crazy with this thing. There's just a few things there that are going to really help him in becoming a blacksmith. So let's go forward. This is the project that Shane sent with these pictures this week, and I think it's lovely. Doing stuff like this, builds those skills. You have to learn how to hit it, how hard to hit it, how to there's so many things. And even if you look at a book, even if you read about how to do something, until you get your hands wet, you're just not going to get a good feel of it. So I love this progress and stuff that Shane's doing. And thank you so much for sending in those pictures, Shane. You sent them actually 2 weeks ago, but I couldn't get them in last week's show. One of the things I would like to say is if you are a craft person, and if you are working on a diorama, if you're working on anything that you built with your hands, I'd love to see it. The tools you use, pictures of your projects, past projects, totally fine. I know that there are a lot of folks out there that maybe can't do things anyway. Certainly, I'm an older person, and I'm an older man is what I was going to say. And it's like, well, these days you got to say I'm an older person. But anyway, I don't want to get weird. But I'm older, and there's a lot of other people that are my age that maybe can't do the things that they love to do anymore, but they had the opportunity to do it when they were younger. And I would love to see those pictures too, reliving those experiences and maybe documenting those experiences is another thing that I really think is great about filming what you do, taking pictures of what you do, and all of that. So keep that in mind, and I'd love to see some pictures of your old projects. We're going to go back now and we're going to go to scratch building and kit bashing part 2. So these are, well, this is just one, it's just 2 shots of the same thing. This is a power supply that I put together prior to last week's show. This is a power supply on the right hand side and in the middle that I put together after last week's show because I said, you know what, I wanted something a little bit more simple, a little bit more iconic, right? Something that looks just like a power supply. Now, the thing that I haven't done to this, and you'll see this, is I put Mr. Surfacer on it, 500, and so that surface is pretty rough. I need to sand that down. That's something I learned from Uncle Night Shift, you know. Don't just put on your surfacer, also sand it down, and you'll get a nice surface, but it'll also kind of, you know, flatten it out a little bit. And so this is not done. I do need to sand down those surfaces, but I love how they look. Again, an iconic design for just like a power panel or something like that, which I'll need even more than I have here. So I have some more that I built. These are the backs of them. Now, these are both going to have lighting in them. So I didn't put a back on these. And in the past, I've built lots of, you know, this kind of thing, and I never put a back on the back because I'm going to put lights in there. I'm going to put this or that. I just like mount it to the wall and, you know, well, this time, because I have so much windows and viewable surfaces all the way around the diorama because of the display that I'm using, I've got to put backs on everything I'm building. So that's one of the things that I'm working on, is making sure that the back looks just as attractive as the front, because you will be able to see everything in this diorama. There won't be there'll be a front, certainly, but the viewable area will be entirely around it, to include the top straight down. So I just love the display case I have. So I'm going to switch back over. Next, this is the one that I built live last week. And frankly, I was pretty worried about it. I think a lot of other people were too. They were like, is this really going anywhere? And it did. Yeah. I just, when I'm building, it takes a little bit to get this stuff figured out. I didn't take anything off, except there were some clear round deals that went over here on the model that I did take off while I was painting, but those are still, slotted to go back on. But when I'm building this thing, I really have to kind of think about this stuff. That's going to look there, and I'll find a part. I in my short this morning, talking about having the show today, I showed a good picture of my bench and what it looks like when I'm doing this. This is hammered. I mean, just stuff is everywhere. Because the process of scratch building for me is, I find an interesting part, and then I take that part and I work with it. I clean it up. I take off, any flash that might be on it. I kind of compare it to other things size wise. Is that going to fit? I stick it on there and go, nah, it's not going to work. But I like that part. So I'm going to set it off to the side, and then I'm going to bring it back in later and maybe use it on something else. So that's the process. And to show that live was kind of my failure last week. It just takes so much time. And so that's why I didn't really go into it. This is the back of that piece. And so I am going to paint these. Obviously, this is only primer, but that primer is pretty heavy stuff, and it will allow it to kind of fill in the gaps, almost like Mr. Surfacer. And then I can, paint these guys up. Now, when I'm painting these, I'm going to think about what it's used for and kind of come up with a color coding system, a subtle color coding system that will kind of differentiate what certain things are used for. And this is directly from like movies and film. Lots of times in a movie, they'll have certain colors of objects. They'll have certain shapes that represent this. So every time you see that shape, it kind of relates to a certain thing. But colors are much easier to change. That's kind of what I like to try to do. So anything power related is going to have a gray color to it. like industrial, even the tubes going into it and things like that. So all of the power is going to be that color. All of the medical equipment is going to be kind of a brighter color with stainless. And this is and I've got some pictures I'm going to show later on. I don't have them right here, but it's this kind of we're going to get to that in a second. It's this kind of a off white that it's called Wimbledon white. And it's a beautiful color and it accents very, very well. And like I said, I do have some pictures later on, I think in here somewhere, that's going to show those. And they're like I did in my Wolfenstein. They just look great as medical equipment because on medical equipment, you're going to have, it's typically in a clean area and they have white so you can see dirt. That's why the white. And then it has stainless steel. So that's what I'm going to try to emulate on these little pieces. This one will be gray, but the ones prior, this one is going to be white with stainless on it as well as the large one on the left. Okay, so I did a fair amount of that. This is going to go on for an awfully long time. I am going to have, I've got 3 floors. Here's the diorama. I've got 3 floors in here, 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 and here. But I've got it on 2 sides. So I've got, in effect, 6 different little areas in this diorama that I'm going to have to need. Why am I keep saying I'm going to have to? But there are 6 areas that I'm going to need to build not a unique scene in, but I kind of think that all 6 of those areas might have a different job to do. Remember when I talked about previously on other live streams and even in my videos and stuff like that, certainly in my coaching, I talk about this. I like to have the machinery in there and the figures in there and all of the things that go into your diorama. I like to have all that stuff in there. But if it doesn't serve a purpose and the people aren't doing something, the figures don't have a specific task that you can see, you can, even if you don't know what they're doing, you're like, oh, it looks like they're doing this. If you can't identify that by just looking at the diorama, if you can't identify that, this is happening there, I haven't really done my job. So on all 6 of those floors that are going to be around, because, Godzilla's hand goes right there, then again, I haven't done my job because I want you to look from one and see what they're doing and then wonder what's happening in the other 5. That's the whole point of making something interesting in your diorama. When I talk about your overall design of a diorama, the first thing is from a distance, it should have some appeal. Lighting sometimes is a great draw, but it's something to catch the eye and draw the eye. There's something over there I want to see. So you create some sort of appeal. And the closer you get to that thing, it starts revealing more detail. You get closer, you can see, hey, this is what it is, and and it's got that, and blah, and all that kind of stuff. The real trick is to never let that process fail. And what I mean by that process is I'm going to approach that diorama or that display, and the closer I get, I keep seeing new things, and those new things are exciting and they're neat. And I'm like, wow, how did they do that? But the closer I get, I should be able to reveal something else. At least that's my goal. Something else that's way too small to see from even 5 feet away. When you're 10 inches away, you can see it. And then you want to get closer and you're pulling out your phone and zooming in. Absolutely. I want people doing that. On my dioramas that I build, I want the detail to not break down. And by that, I mean, the closer they get and they're thrilled with it and they're engaged and they want to see more and they're getting into it, if they get to a point where your detail falls apart and they can start seeing glue drops, or they can see the foot doesn't really stick to the ground. It's like hovering in the air because of the position of and it's not supposed to be that way. If you get close enough and then start to find fault, everything that you've done in that person walking up to see your diorama goes away. They forget it. What they remember is it looked really good from afar, but when I got up close, it just didn't, it just kind of fell apart. So I really try to concentrate on those details. And that doesn't mean, and this may come to some surprise, but I'm going to go back to this. That doesn't mean that I have taken care of all the flash, all the, whatever happens to your little model piece. I'm not saying it's perfect, so it looks absolutely 100% real. It should look as close as you can get it. That's really not what I'm wanting to get across. The point is the illusion, the ability to see the story or the circumstance that you're creating your diorama. That's what can't break down. It doesn't fall apart. You don't look and the backside of this thing, because of the angle you're looking, isn't even painted. That kind of thing can just destroy it for someone. Or, something's, it just, you get closer and it's like, well, it looked good from afar, but it just, that looks out of place. That kind of thing you really want to be conscientious of. And so when I'm doing those kind of activities, when I'm building and placing and trying to figure out what's going to go into this diorama, I often find myself moving away from it, taking different angles and looks at it. Look up from down, from up. I really try my best to do all the ceilings in my dioramas. I do not skimp on the underneath of anything. I really try to make sure from any visible angle, it looks correct. If they can see it, it should be right, and that takes time. That takes a lot of time and effort and thought, and not, I wouldn't say planning, but just care, to hit those elements, to hit those things that you want to accomplish in that model, which in my estimation is never allowing the illusion that you're putting together, this visual story that you're trying to tell, never allowing that to fall apart. So just something I like to think of when I'm building, so that I can get those details correct. And if it falls out of those parameters, then I'm like, man, it's just not going to work. I got to keep going. I have to keep working. Or sometimes I just pull that thing out and say, it's just not going to work. I can't stress this enough. There are many times I've built something, like I'm building this, this week I'm building this, and I've said, it's just not going to work. And I've put a lot of time in it. I have things on my shelves up here that I've put a day or better into. And I'm not saying, oh, today I'm going to do something, I worked on it for 20 minutes. I'm saying a day. I took my entire day and I focused on one thing. It's not that great to do. I'm not saying that's what you should do. I'm saying that in this pursuit, that can happen. And you can find that it doesn't work. So, think ahead. Keep these things in mind. I'm trying to keep you from the pain that I have experienced by, man, I built this great thing, and it just completely falls flat when it gets into the diorama. It doesn't work. So anyway, there's a longer story to that too, to tell, which was not that long ago. It was lobster nets. I was trying to make lobster traps for my world, my D&D diorama, and the lobster traps took, I want to say it was a week. I spent an entire week to make little tiny, they were like this big, little tiny lobster traps. I made 2 because I went down this rabbit hole of how to tie an actual net. Not a macrame net, not a crisscross of lines, not tying double knots and then moving over here and tying more double knots. No, I learned to actually make a net as you would for fishing for fish, or trying to net fish. Again, wonderful process to go down that rat hole rabbit hole, rat hole, whichever you want to say. But it took a week on two little things like that. Yeah, I don't know the how smart that was, frankly, but when sometimes when you're obsessively going for something, you do it anyway, and I did. So I want to talk about this. We're gonna go down and talk about Godzilla. So the Hand of Godzilla got a whole bunch of love this week. Um, this is what it looks like now, and I have some video that I would love to show you about getting the Hand of Godzilla to this point. This is not the finish line whatsoever. This is the underlayment. I built a substructure, a jig. No, it's not a jig. An aperture, an armature. I think an armature. Yeah, it's not an aperture. That's a aperture on that camera. So I built the armature, and then I put one round layer, I guess, of this air dry clay. And it took an entire week. And in that time, and this was understood, so that's why I did it, it shrunk and it cracked. And that's what this is. This is after it shrunk and cracked. I put this on it and got it to the second layer. And the second layer has got a much better shape to it and will allow me then to take a thinner layer of milliput, a different kind of clay, over the top for the final skin that I'm going to put on it. So this is going to shrink. This is going to get a little bit smaller, and it'll crack just like the last time. But this next time I should be able to put skin on it. I'm pretty happy about it. So now I'm going to show you a video. And this here video is me putting on the that second layer of clay. And so I've got it sped up. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking the air dry clay, and you got to kind of take out a little bit at a time, because I mean, it's air dry. It's going to dry while you're working with it. Though when you get a nice, fair amount on there, you see I'm dipping my fingers in some clean water over there out of my paint wash off jar, and I put a little bit of water on it, and then I can smooth it down by also, and you're going to see this a lot more later on, I'll actually just dip, just like I did there. I'll dip the clay before I put it on the hand to get a little bit more water on it. That allows it to stick to what I'm trying to put it on, because you can either wet the surface you're trying to put it on, or just put a little bit of water on the clay as you're putting it on, and then you press it in. Now, after it's pressed in, I kind of smooth it. I'll take my fingers, dip them in that water, and then smooth it. If you don't do that, it basically sticks to your fingers quite well. So it's not going to allow you to kind of smooth out the surface and get the textures you want. Now I'm starting with the fingers, and this will jump forward a little bit. I can kind of go forward, but I start with the fingers, and then I start getting into the palm and then the back of the hand. And that was one of the things I think that was really messing with me the first time, was I didn't have enough on the palm and on the left side of the hand there, the outside of the hand, if you will. And it looked really funky. It looked too skinny. So after I got this on there, I was much, much happier with it. So I continue working on this, and you'll notice that I'm slowing down now and adding. I'm really trying to get the shape. And the fun thing about this is, even though there's a bunch on there, I mean, it's a good half an inch thick. You can shift, I guess, the bulges. You can shift the clay to get things where you want. It doesn't like dry and you're only working with what you just added to it. No, the whole thing below, once you get something coated over it, will hold its moisture a little bit. And so you can work with it. And that was really big on the back of the hand here, because I had to get those ridges. I'm trying to kind of work into where I'm going to put those ridges on the back of the hand, the tendons that control the fingers. And this really helped in doing that part of it, because I had to move those around quite a bit after I laid the clay in. So let's jump ahead a little bit more. I don't want to bore you to death. Here, where I'm doing the fingers, I kind of went back to my Godzilla pictures, my reference photos from the original Godzilla, and those original Godzilla hands were not like an alligator's hand. If you look at the newer ones that they're doing in CGI and stuff like that these days, they look like an alligator's paw and or foot or however you want to put it. It's much more sleek. It's much more anatomically correct, as you would imagine. But the old one, the one that I had enjoyed as a kid growing up and stuff like that, it was this really, well, I mean, it was a suit, number one, you know. So it had this real almost comical shape to it, but the fingers were quite large. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm taking a little bit of this putty, I roll it in my hand to kind of get, a little snake or whatever, a worm, and then I wrap it around where I believe the joints are, and then I start smoothing it in. I'm not a sculptor, but I got to tell you, this was pretty intuitive. I was really worried that it was going to look like, a fifth grade, art project. But I think it actually came out pretty darn nice. And it was just, I kept working with it. I figured out, the smoothing and adding water and all that kind of stuff. And then that allowed me to make it, I believe, as a good sub base to put skin over, the next time around. Um, and each iteration of this, I'm going to go a little bit further forward here. Each iteration of this adds a little bit more detail. It's kind of like that zoom in thing when you're looking for details on your diorama. A little bit further away, it looks like this. A little bit closer, it looks a little bit more detail. So that's what I'm preparing this for. The next surface, the next layer that I'll have on this is going to be the skin. And so it's important that I'm able to take that and have the stuff under it to give it the structure so that it looks like a hand and the knuckles and these ridges on the back of the fingers and all that kind of stuff. So it now I almost used all of that air dry clay, so I am just about out of it. But I got to tell you, I'm really happy with how this thing came out. I don't think it's beyond anybody to do it. I mean, it's just clay, and this I think will be a wonderful just start to my my hand that now I need to carve. So there it is. After it has dried, it's been drying for a couple of days now. Yeah, it's a little bit bulbous, but that's how the fingers looked. I will fill that in here and there so it doesn't look too goofy. But like I said, I'm pretty darn happy with it. Later on, I'll get more detail in there. I really want to get some fun details in there. And I think this is going to be a great start. So it's got the general shape, and that's really what was so important to me. And that's where you can see this here. It's got that overall general shape, and everything's where it should be. So pretty happy with it. Now, earlier I said I would show you pictures of what the medical and the kind of scientific equipment is going to kind of look like, what color it's going to take on. And this is what I'm thinking. I just love the look of this. This is from Wolfenstein, a diorama I did a couple of years ago. And I just really like this aesthetic. The silver is just silver, but it's supposed to be stainless. And then the other is that Wimbledon white. It's a beautiful color. I really like the Wimbledon white, and I think it does give a nice hospital or scientific look to the equipment. This is not equipment from this. This is equipment from my Wolfenstein diorama, but I just wanted you to see the kind of the color palette that I'd be using on that. So now that brings us to our last topic, which is the diorama coaching and mentoring. I did a bunch on that this week. This is, and I'll show you live, of course. This is the project that I'm currently working on during the week with my coaching student Bob. And what this is now, I don't know if you remember this cart. This cart, I'm just using it as a stand-in so I can have something here. But this cart was built for our Barrett's Coffee House in Krondor diorama, the D&D diorama. But it works great for this because what we're trying to show here um, is is not a pile of rock, but a rock formation that's kind of come up out of the soil. You know, it's kind of come up, and then they blasted a road through it because they wanted this road to go through here. So they blasted through the rocks. So that's what we're kind of going for, and it just I'm really having a heck of a lot of time fun with it. Oh, I got some comments here. And then James said we'll have to look at dates. Now that's way back. I'm sorry, James, I didn't get back to that. But that is about having another talk, another panel, or just getting together and talking about things because I enjoyed it so much. Just talking, diorama building. So thanks very much. Here's Yul Adamas. My niece just get into making paper characters and they look awesome. Thanks very much because it's important that you get that idea of creating. You start in on anything. Um, I think it just gets your mind into that idea of creating things your own and not necessarily trying to go somewhere to find something to occupy your mind. Videos and iPads and games and all those things are so prevalent these days. Almost all families have them. You almost have to be stringently against it to not expose your younger folks in your family to that kind of thing. I know our nieces and nephews were held off on that kind of thing for a number of years, and it allowed them to really pick up reading as one of their favorite things. And that has lasted into adulthood because my nieces and nephews are adults at this point. And that is so wonderful because I think if you can instill that I need to create on my own or I need to do something, it's funny you say digital or analog these days, and a lot of people don't understand it because they don't understand what analog means. Analog is kind of electronic, but it's also it's Boolean. It's like on off. It's an analog. It's a direct reading. It's not going through a computer processor. It's not being processed, and then the result is given to you. So it's the direct reading of what you're doing. It's like an analog thing. When I'm taking my fingers and I'm sticking them in that clay, that's a completely different feeling than smoothing a surface in a 3D CAD program. And obviously it is, but there's more to it because the sensory feel of physically sculpting, there's nothing like it in the digital world. So if you're exposing the young people in your family to that, or if you're even older and you're just getting into it, it is a monumental jump in the ability to kind of reawaken that creativity that's in you. Because our creativity, unfortunately, I've read some things that says it's not necessarily valued in work. It is not necessarily something that people want in the workforce these days. They want people to come in and say, I need you to do that. I need you to focus on that. And I need you to do it. Here's how it's supposed to be done. Here's the end result. Now do it. Well, creative minds in that atmosphere, I was one of those people, have a hard time because I was very successful in business. That's secondary to the point. It was a struggle to do it because the creativity, I never let it go. I never let it be overruled by anything else. I kept my creativity there. I kept it for home. For 30 years, that's what the shop was. But that creativity wasn't held back. Well, unfortunately, some folks find that they lack creativity. I've heard this comment many, many times. Oh, I can't think of it. It's just because you haven't practiced. I swear to you, if you start doing it, your brain will adapt. We are the most adaptable animal on this planet. Take any other animal and put it anywhere, and it's going to have a harder time than us. some better, but you see my point. We're exceedingly adaptable. Your brain will bring back that creativity. You will be able to get those ideas, those motivational things, and the ideas of, oh, I can do this way because that's how I know to do it. But then you say, well, wait a minute, because of the other stuff that I know, I can do it this way, and it's better than this way. That's creativity. That's you putting your mark on something. You know how to do something, and then you figure out how to do it better or more to your liking or easier or more ergonomically or whatever. That's creativity. And so you can spark and you can grow that by just doing activities like we do here. If you keep your mind in that creative bubble, it's remarkable because it impacts the rest of your life. Now, there is a downside, being too creative and not having enough discipline to do things to make a living. Aha, see? That's because doing what I'm doing is a wonderful thing. But I have to tell you, I worked my whole life, so I'm able to do this today. If you're just starting out and you're thinking, well, I'm just going to do this and blah, 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 it's a little bit more difficult to make a living at it. It's a little bit more difficult to get to the point where you can base your living on it. So kind of balance that. I see a lot of people these days going headlong into things. And I did the same thing, but I had a safety net. I had 50 years of work behind me. There was my safety net. But if you're a younger person trying to go into that creative field, it's extremely difficult. And I just want you to know that. It's not to say don't do it, but there's a different way to do it, like I did, just giving my experience, to keep that alive, doing things at night, doing things on the weekends, doing things at home. And then when you go to work during the day, it's not shutting it off, but you have to definitely suppress it. And it's that point of complete suppression of your creative self, that I think is not positive. I think trying to preserve some of that creativity so that you can do these things, so you can do stuff. And I look at things because that's just the stuff that I did. But whatever your creative outlet is, if you allow that to still grow while you're pursuing your lifelong dreams and your business goals and earning money for your family and all of those things, if you can just still keep that vibrancy of creativity in your life, I think that when the opportunity presents itself, then you can go headlong into it. That's what I did. I'm just giving you my own personal experience. I got a couple other things here. The road area at this Yule Adamas, and I hope that I'm saying that properly. The road area would be great for some tanks or a Jeep. Yep. And maybe like an ambush group on the rocks behind that ridge. Exactly. And I love that idea. The neat thing about this coaching is this. I am teaching my student the techniques. I'm not building this for the student. This is a training aid. This is what I show, and the filming of it and then the talking about it and the discussions that we have during the build is really what the class is for. Because if you commission me, which I don't do, but if you commission me to build you something, that's giving you a fish. I'm trying to teach people to fish, right? I really want to pass on the things that I've learned. So let's look a little bit further at this. And I want to get back to Yule again. Yeah, they just have to flex the mind muscle. You're exactly right. If you're not using it, sometimes it can atrophy, and you don't want your creativity to atrophy. So keep it alive. Keep challenging yourself. And I really honestly believe if some folks will do this, they'll do what they know how to do, and that's where it ends. I don't know how they got to that point with having that attitude. Maybe they were a little bit more when they were younger, they blah, blah, blah. They were fine with it, but then at some point they stop, right? And they stop because they don't know how to do the next thing. They don't know where to go next. They don't, want to make a mistake. This was a wonderful conversation that I had with my student this week about making mistakes. I've told this story before. My mother-in-law, my wonderful mother-in-law, taught me how to make roast beef. I'm the cook in the family, and I love cooking. So for the holidays, for Christmas Eve, we have roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. And my mother-in-law taught me how to make that because my wife's family years ago is from England. So it was just something passed down years and years. It took me 5 times of making that roast, following the exact same recipe to make it so it was good. 5 times, you know? And I'm a pretty good cook. I have no training. I just grew up cooking, and stuff like that. And in the 28 years we've been married, we've been together for 35. In all of that time, I've always done the cooking. So I'm pretty good at just cooking. Nothing fancy, just cooking. But still 5 times following the exact same recipe because there's a feel to it, right? There's a sense that you gain. You know when the meat is ready to go in the oven. You know when the meat is ready to come out. You know its looks, its smells, its sounds. All of those things congeal to say done. Get it out of the oven. Cover it up. Let it sit. The whole thing. It's the exact same thing with these crafts. Getting your mind into that point of doing something and understanding that I might fail or it might not be what I want the very first time. But if I keep pushing myself and I do it again or take that failure and learn what I lost from that failure or learn what I didn't do right, keep that from the failure, but then do it again. It's the person that stops. The person that says, I don't want to challenge myself because I don't want to embarrass myself or they don't want to have a failure or whatever. And that person out there, their mind works that way. That person, you have to fight harder to get beyond that because their natural inclination is, I do everything. I'm like a straight A student but they don't want to take chances because they don't want to wreck their record, On the converse or the other side of it, what I will do is I will go headlong into something, not knowing how to do it. And by doing it for so many years, it enables you to learn things about trying to accomplish what you want to do. Do you see what I'm saying? If you look at a trail and say, I can't run up that trail because I'm just going to fall down. Well, you never learn how to run up that trail without trying and falling down. You learn where not to step. You learn not to step on those rocks. You learn to grab a tree root, and you can run up that trail. But if you don't try because you don't want to fail, you can't do it. So I really, when I'm thinking about a new diorama, when I'm thinking about new aspects of a diorama, when I'm thinking about building anything, I really always have at least a small point or a small component that is just completely off the rails that I've not done that before. I might have done a few things about it, that kind of technique, kind of dabbled in that discipline a little bit, but I don't know that I can accomplish everything. And I think it's those challenges that help you grow. And other than that, it keeps it really interesting. Any movie you ever watch, there's a certain thing that happens. They start the movie and things are like, oh, you kind of get these settings and stuff like that, and then things start to go up, and then something crashes, and then everything falls down, and then slowly there's this reconciliation, and then the movie, at least an American movie, ends typically on a happy note. This is the same arc that most movies go through. You understand what's happening. There's this arc where this horrible thing has to be overcome and everybody crashes and there's this big negative and there's a big resolution, So the whole point of that is the fact that we as humans, our brains understand that, and in trying to solve a problem, you'll hit those same things. You'll understand the problem at first, and then you'll make some headway, and then you'll get to the top and the peak, and then it'll just crash, and you'll just throw your toys out of the cart and all the babies out with the bathwater, and you're just like, I can't do it. I'm done. And if you stop there, there's never any resolution, right? If you don't get beyond that point where you can't figure it out, and you're not on your own. You can go online, you can talk to family and friends, you can look up reference on YouTube. Is amazing for, telling you how to do something. But the point is, don't stop at that crash, because we all have it. I have a crash in every single diorama. There's a point where, like, man, I just don't know how to do it. And I've talked about it on my shorts and on my videos and all that kind of stuff. It is a natural thing. There's nothing wrong with it, because after that crash, if you remember everything that you did up to that point, you figure out the good, you throw out the bad, and you give it another shot, and then there is resolution. You learn those tools by doing it repetitively. If you stop at the crash, you never learn the tools about how to get beyond it. And then you limit yourself. You say, well, I don't want to do that. I just kind of want to keep doing what I'm doing. I just want to keep building armor. I just want to build tanks. I'm really good at building tanks. So I'm going to build a crud load of tanks. And I know people like that. And they're great. These tanks are the most wonderful tank I've ever seen. But what else you got? Because once I've seen all your tanks, I got nothing left. See my point? I hope that's not a negative. It's not meant to be a negative. It's meant to be, when you find a challenge in front of you in modeling or whatever, understand you're going to stumble. Understand there's going to be these negatives. Understand that you're going to need to persevere to get beyond that kind of stuff. And that's really where it's going to take you. That's really where it's going to make a difference in your modeling. That's where you're learning things, and you're gathering knowledge that nobody else has ever told you. And you're able to accomplish what you want to do. And it gets easier and easier and easier. And the challenges get harder and harder and harder every single time. That's growth. And hopefully, that's growth how I understand it, But I hope that is a kind of message that can keep some people that are watching this, able to go forward in the things. I get so many people that say, boy, if I had the time. Well, you have to make the time. I worked a very intensive job. I don't have your situation. You don't have mine. So I can't say it's easy, just go do it. No, that's not the point I'm trying to make. But I do know that I had a focused need that I needed to satisfy in creating for years. And thankfully, my situation allowed me to do it. And I was able to concentrate on creating that whole time. And I was able to keep challenging myself. And I was able to keep growing in skills and disciplines that I felt I needed to be the best at whatever I was going for. And you just can't do that if you're not willing to take a chance or be challenged in what you do. So anyway, I just will go off on a tangent like this. This is, I don't know, been a half an hour tangent, but I hope that it gives some idea and some background as to how you can bring this into your creative sphere, how you can develop your creativity if you feel like it's just not there anymore, if you don't feel like you have the motivation. It's just little steps. It's just do one and see it through. And then next time you do it a little bit harder. It can absolutely work. You have to be pretty rough on yourself sometimes. Don't beat yourself up, but you have to say, nope, that's not good enough. And I say that a lot, so you have to be as real with yourself as you possibly can be. But also enjoy what you have done, and enjoy the things that really make an impact on you when you do learn something new. Celebrate it. I've said that before. There are times I get up from my desk, I physically get up from my desk, and I whoop and holler. I do. There's nobody in here. Ghost might be in here. Years ago, Oscar would be in here before he passed. And he'd be looking at me like, what's going on, weird man? Because I'm whooping and hollering because I just did something really wonderful. Um, Take joy in that. And those things will happen for you. Okay, see, look, I can just go on and on and on and on. So I'm going to stop. I would love to get back to some of these great comments real quick. And then Yul Adama says, every form of art has a type of communication. Once you learn to translate those patterns into understanding, you can then speak to others with it, even if they don't understand. I believe you're absolutely correct in that. You can cross a lot of lines with something that you can do with your hands that you can't maybe elucidate with your speech. You can hand somebody something that you made, and there's a communication there that you two will have, that personal communication by them taking it in their hands from yours and looking at it and examining it and looking back in your eyes. That's communicating. You're absolutely correct. And thank you for that. That was a really, really nice comment. I really appreciate it. So let me get back to this. We started out, this was Bob and I, my student, and I started out and I showed him how to carve these rocks. And those are then, well, we started out how to, glue it down to the substrate and then glue the rocks on them and then cut the rocks and stuff. And then the rocks, again, are meant to be, they're supposed to look like a vein of rock, meaning that this rock formation is coming up out of the ground from heave or from tectonic shift, whatever. And so that's there. And then they had to blow this stuff up. So this is one rock. It's fractured. It's got all these fissures in it and stuff like that. Here's the other side of the road. So that's what I started with, and we carved these. Then, and I will say this, that is not black paint. It's brown black. And I say brown, but it's also burnt umber. So I'm just leading you astray here. It's brown umber and black. It is more black than brown umber, but you can still see this deep, deep, deep brown in it when you're looking. It is a brown, which I love. I love that not being exactly black. Then I only used these three colors to go ahead and do my aging and painting of it. And I started with the first one there, the yellow ochre. All of these are acrylics from Vallejo. Love of Vallejo, by the way. And so here it is with the first two colors. I did a dry brush, a very light dry brush with the yellow ochre. And then I came back with the deck tan, that's the second color. And then I basically outlined everything. And that was really my purpose. I wanted to outline each of these rocks so they stood out. Um, the reference photo that I was given for this is a great reference photo. I'd love to share it with you. Unfortunately, the reference photo is also used in, the brand Yeti. They do like coolers and stuff like that. Well, they use this image on their branding. I found it online. I'm like, oh, it's a beautiful image. And then, oh, can't touch it because copyright and stuff like that. So it's a real place, and it's in Oklahoma, and they're going through this cut of rocks on a cart. And so they're going through this cut of rock, and so that's what it is. Now, the rock is very dark. I've always done rock that looks kind of like granite or sandstone or something like that. And that was something I really liked about this. It's a very, very deep, dark rock. And so to bring those colors out, I just went into, the edges and I tried to define each rock. Now, in doing so, pardon me, I'm also trying to make sure that if you look this from, bird's eye view straight down, you'll see that those cracks or those fissures that go through it continue from one rock in the upper right-hand corner to the lower left. The rock fissures kind of continue between those two rocks past the road. That was just another aspect that I tried to use to show this is a singular rock formation that's been, a passageway through it has been put there. So I painted with the yellow. I came back with white, and while I'm doing the white, it's a little bit more of a wash. It's about the consistency of milk, so it's a little heavy wash, a little bit, but with a very, very small brush, just hitting the edges, and then a little bit of blending. Not a lot of blending, because blending is what you get when you want a single color that blends from one to the next. I wanted high contrast. These colors went on to give me a contrast. I didn't want this blended color, because I do that quite a bit, where I'll just keep the surface wet and I can blend colors with acrylics, and I love that process. But in here, I really wanted everything dry, so I would work on a little area and then move to another complete area, let that dry and come back. The other thing that happens, of course, is your acrylic is going to it's going to dry and it's going to lighten a little bit. Acrylic lightens once it dries. It's not quite as vibrant after it dries out. After I did the white, then I came back with the rust, also an acrylic, and then that rust was placed into different areas, and you can see it real well here in the bottom center. There's kind of back in that little dark shadowed area on the base, on the lower part of it. There's a little bit of that oak. Well, it's not ochre, but it's that rust color. And that rust color then I put throughout in little dots, little expressions here and there, and that's really how you get this variegated finish. There's some highlights of yellow in there because when this rock breaks off, it will break off, and until the sun either oxidizes or whatever the heck bleaches, I don't know, it doesn't turn completely black. So it could stay with that rusted kind of little look for 100 years. I don't know, but the older rock doesn't have it. So that was a lot of fun. And I think that, teaching somebody how to do these techniques, talking to them about it while we're doing it online live, it's one of the best things that I've personally done to figure out what I'm not doing in my regular videos, what I'm not getting across in an effective way. When I'm talking to Bob, my student, he's able to give me direct feedback and say, hey, no, I was actually talking about that. Oh, okay, well, let's go look at that. Or like in this last week, he said, hey, can you do this instead of that? And that's exactly what we did. We just completely shifted gears because he's on a little bit of a different program. It's more of a mentoring program where it's just a continuous thing at this point. We just do week after week after week, which is really fun. And he always comes up with a different project. And so we've got a lot of stuff on the books, but I am offering this training to other folks. So if you're interested, you can contact me through the comments. So thanks very much. Let's take a look. I think we're about there. This next week, what I'll be doing is I'll be putting some plants. He gave me some pictures of some of the local fauna or flora, I should say. And so I'll get that added to that. And lastly, I would love to say thank you so much to my patrons and my YouTube members. When I do these videos for training, what I do is I put them on my Patreon and my YouTube members areas on these services. And what that is you're not going to get the full training, but you'll hear me about talking. The last one I uploaded was 2 hours, and that was the first video on this. That'll come out in July sometime. But if you're a member, you can see it right away. It's not the full training because I'm not there to talk to you one-on-one, but you can certainly get an idea as to how these trainings go. And certainly if you're interested in getting some mentoring or some coaching, contact me. So I think that's about it. I have had a wonderful week. I hope you have as well. I don't think we got anything else to talk about. We did the rocks. We did Godzilla's hand. We did some of these here scratch building things. And then we talked about Shane's really, really cool forge, which frankly, I really, really like Shane. I'm going to have to look into that because for $100, that's cheaper than I could make one with. So I hope you had a wonderful time today. I certainly did. And I hope that gives you some ideas or maybe some thoughts about getting on your own bench or getting on the kitchen table or going out in the garage or doing whatever you got to do a little bit of modeling, because it sure is a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. It's sunny, so I'm going to get outside and do a little bit of yard work. But then I'm going to get back in here and do some more work. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. We'll see ya. Bye-bye.